You've seen Kurak's Lair plenty of times, but have you ever wondered what it looks like from the outside? Plenty of Conan's dungeons hold little secrets and quirks outside their usual play area, and today we're going to be out of bounds to search for the secrets of Kurak's Lair. Now, if you've been here even once, I'm sure you already know this dungeon is incredibly dark in areas. To make sure we don't miss out on any of the fine details, let's light this place up. That is much better. We firstly begin with this shaft of light coming from a hole in the ceiling. This gap is quite unique, as it's actually a direct line to get out of bounds. Of course you can't reach it through normal gameplay, but with just a little bit of flight, one slip through and we are officially out of bounds. From here we can begin to see how the dungeon has been put together. However, before we look at the details, the location of dungeons is important. They're usually kept very far away from the dense parts of the map to improve performance, so where exactly is Kurak's Lair kept? It's actually tucked away behind the volcano. The eclipse is, quite interestingly, kept within a sky sphere which has its own unique skybox inside of it, which is how they managed to have the eclipse without it being set to a global effect like it previously was. Most of Conan's dungeons are spread out around the fringes, but this one is pretty close to the volcano, though of course that is a fairly low density area, so hence why it probably doesn't impact performance too much. Anyway, let's get back to the dungeon itself. This construction is pretty standard for how most caves are made, which is essentially a whole bunch of rock tiles placed together to form the cave, which then kind of just hangs in the void. A lot of these rock pieces are mostly invisible from the outside, which I assume is to reduce performance load inside the dungeon itself, so the game is not loading textures that you can't see. Some of the more structured elements are made from Lemurian pieces, pretty much identical to those seen around Zelhar or the Sunken City, most notably within the main arena itself, though there are a few other remnants around. From the exterior we can get a good view of what the arena looks like before we reach it. On the more technical side of things, there's an invisible trigger somewhere between the cave you drop in from and the ground of the arena, which begins the starting sequence of the boss fight, and that unfortunately does not give you much time to actually appreciate the structure of the arena. Whilst everything is focused obviously around the eclipse, there's still some interesting stuff around the edges. It is quite simple, sure, but the architecture is fairly nice. I really like the fusion of the almost crumbling Lemurian with the cavern walls, and whilst I'm still not entirely sure why Kurak is in a Lemurian ruin, it's a fairly impressive arena. Depending on the state of the dungeon, you can also see into the side room in which the dragon spawns during the fourth phase of the fight. Unfortunately, there's nothing special in here. It's simply just an empty space where the dragon can spawn before the door opens without obviously just popping into existence. Funnily enough, the spiders in phase 1 of the fight do actually just blatantly spawn in, but because of the darkness spell cast in the area, any vision of them is obscured and they spawn in the corners, so that effect conceals it well. Over towards the raised platform, you're usually blocked from prematurely advancing by a purple shroud. Now I assume this was just basically a curtain, but no, it's actually a massive block that extends across the platform, up the roof, and even a fair portion out of bounds. To be frank, I've got no idea why this block is so big, but it is indeed quite large, and if you're out of bounds you can easily just walk around atop it. I also noticed at this point there was a random miniature golem walking around. I didn't spawn it in, and I didn't even reach the golem phase of the fight at this point, but going out of bounds can cause some pretty glitchy behaviour even at the best of times. Kurak's dungeon is actually a big offender in this aspect. Each time the dungeon cannot locate you, for example if you fly too far away, or if you enter ghost mode, the screen shakes like it does at the end of the fight and all of the enemies despawn, which was a constant issue during the recording of this video, but on the upside it does reset the enraged timer that will cause the Blood Moon Beast to spawn if you're in there too long. Something else quite interesting is that when you enter the fight, Kurak's 3 minions are visible on the far platform. However, you spend about 99% of the fight on the low ground, so you can't actually see much of who's up there. Of course, we assume it's Kurak and his 3 buddies, but because you cannot truly see, it's quite easy to conceal the fact that Kurak does not actually spawn until the final phase of the fight, when all you have to do is hit him once to win. If you complete the dungeon close to the barrier, There's a chance you could see him spawn and sink into the kneeling pose, but during the whole fight, apart from that last phase, he's never actually present, and his speech before and during the fight is simply an audio played from nowhere. The final thing of interest I found is weird. Right on the roof of the arena there's just an empty cage. These are not anything new, I'm pretty sure they're added in update 2.4, but there's nothing in here, and unfortunately I can't check on my own if anything spawns in here during the fight, but it's just a very strange thing to have on the inaccessible roof of a boss arena. I suppose there's a chance it could be used for something technical that I don't understand, or it's just a remnant of the development process, but again, I got no idea. If any of you know why this cage might be here, or have any theories, do let me know. There's a couple more interesting things focused around the dynamics of how different pieces get put together, but I think we've covered about all that lays out of bounds in Kurak's Lair. I've had to go out of bounds in this dungeon quite a few times for lore videos in the past, though I hadn't noticed the cage on the roof until now, but I think this is probably something people haven't thought to see, and if nothing else, it's really interesting to see how these dungeons get put together on the development side. This is one of my favourite dungeons, and when you play through it, it feels very atmospheric, very tight, but then when you go out of bounds, you can kind of see how it's almost messy in an ordered way. And you can kind of put together in your head how the development started, and then of course you get the end product by playing through the dungeon itself. There are plenty of other dungeons in the game, so if you would like to see me explore the out of bounds areas of those other dungeons, do let me know. For now though, I think that about wraps up everything inside, and indeed outside, of Kurak's Lair. Thank you for watching, and of course a massive thanks to our wonderful, esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's something a little different from the usual, but I do quite like testing the game and seeing how some pieces of content that I really enjoy are put together on the development side. Again, thank you very much for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.